Hello there and welcome. In this video I've got you 10 tips and tricks about the Barbarian culture in Age of Wonders 4. I did my best to summarize their strengths, weaknesses and capabilities with this video, and I hope it'll be a helpful watch for you. Barbarians are, in my opinion, one of the most, if not the most, powerful faction currently available in the game, due to the fact that mobility is one of their big strengths, as well as having a really strong alpha strike, which means these two things are devastating against any AI enemy, and I've read several times that some people even seem to ban barbarians completely from their multiplayer games. That being said, let's get started with number one, Territorial Dominance. This is one of the things that I want to point out at the very first. Barbarians get to have pathfinders that have terrain walk in various flavors, which means they get to traverse terrain much faster than most cultures. Only the mystics can really compete with that with their ethereal scouts. On top of that, they're mounted, which means they have a higher movement point pool. Admittedly, most scouts have that, but they don't have this plethora of terrain walk. But on top of that, our scouts even get to build outposts for us. Admittedly, they are doubly as costly, and the scout is nailed down during the building process, but nevertheless, we can build a scout in every city of ours, which means taking territory is stupidly easy. And when you're playing barbarians, I highly recommend to build a couple of pathfinders and just scout out the cities that you want to have and just claim that territory for you, because it's nigh impossible for anybody else to do so before you do. Which brings me to number two, outpost power. So outposts don't have any limit, apart from the gold upkeep that they cost. You don't have a limit like with the cities, and the advantage that results out of that is pretty obscene. You get to just claim any magic material that you want to. Just build a outpost right next to it, claim it with a worker camp, done. You can do the same with wonders. You don't get the income bonuses from production or food. I don't know, maybe they get rerouted to another city and I have never noticed. Let me know if you know. But knowledge and mana are also resources that outposts can claim for your empire. This leads to so many uses of pinning down outposts, it's just crazy. Downside, I repeat, they cost gold upkeep. And when you start building as many outposts as you want to, because you have the capability to do so with your pathfinders, you do notice the upkeep eventually. That being said, it is a very, very big advantage that this faction can utilize really, really well, because on top of that, you have Materium and Nature as your starting affinities, which means you even get better outpost building skills and a faster city building skill on top of that. So yeah, it's really one of your primary strengths, but it doesn't stop there. The tier 1 roster of the Barbarian culture is, in my opinion, one of the best in the entire game. Warriors are optionally mounted, which means you can pump up their potential further, and they come with a 90% chance to stun. Admittedly, they are tier 1 units, which means if the enemy tier is higher, this chance crumbles down to a very, very low number. But if you happen to lower the enemy status resistance, game's a different thing. This makes the warrior a really versatile unit. They also come with all the stats that you would expect from a shield unit, so they can booster up their companions around them. They are kind of resolute. The magical resistance is of course non-existent, but altogether for a tier 1 unit it is already quite crazy what you get there. But the Sunderers, in my opinion, are even better. They have the ability to sunder down defenses of enemies they hit with a ranged attack. This lowers defense values, status resistance, and on top of that is usable every single turn. Single action, their javelins, if they crit, I've seen them crit up onto 50 points and such with my regular builds that are run on barbarians. Not bad for a tier 1 unit. On top of that, they're skirmishes, which means they are fast. 40 points of movement means they can really move over the map really, really quickly. You can produce a ton of these, and Yeah. The tier 1 units of this faction are insane. Even the Pathfinder inherits the Savage Strike ability, which means, technically, if you have something like Overwhelm Tactics or something that increases critical hit chances, even these guys can hit like a truck. It is quite something. Just mind you, scouts don't receive unit enchantments as other units do, so they are by no means a good solution for the long run, but in the early game. Well, number 4, we're already talking about it, crits. So the critical hit system of the Barbarian Culture is very straightforward. When somebody crits, they get to add some more blight damage on top of that. This makes them a natural receiver for any crit strategy, and Tome of Artificing and Tome of Devastation are two natural fits to this culture. But there is one little caveat behind all that. Blight damage is actually one of the least desirable damage types, in my humble opinion, for critical hits. There are certain factions that are almost immune against that kind of damage. So always take a second glance on your enemies, whether or not they have a blight resistance going on in themselves, because this might really lower your alpha strike considerably. And knowing so beforehand is pretty good. But that being said, this is literally the only weakness about the crit system on the Barbarians. I just wanted to point that out, because there are a couple of builds that can rack up quite a substantial blight resistance. Yes, even a form trait that can bring up blight resistance. So if you have to counter Barbarians in any way, blight resistance is one of the ways, because it really takes down their extra damage of critical hits by a lot. So, number 5. Let's talk downsides. War Shaman. Yeah, this guy. So yeah, I'm really harsh on these. They're really the weakest support unit in the game that I know of. At least barbarians get one, unlike the dark culture, which has to opt out of the support branch entirely. So it's not the worst. Invigorate has its qualities. It is by no means a bad spell. It does a lot of things for you. It just has these two pesky downsides of being a full cycled action, oh, three actually, having a really mediocre range, and having a stupidly high cooldown. One of these three things is too much for my opinion, but this is a balancing decision as far as I see it. It is the price you pay for that insane tier 1 roster. Somewhere we have to deduct power, and definitely the War Shaman is where it stands. But the Fury is also a very good unit once it is enchanted, but without that, yeah, probably one of the worst archers in game. They get Frenzy from the get-go, which means they empower themselves with every shot they take, and they have that Savage Strike. But their damage is subpar for a tier 2 unit, and Frenzy has that downside that you need to get some shots in before the damage actually shines. So yeah, the tier 2 roster is definitely the weak side of the barbarians, the price you pay for this insane power early on, but I really find it pretty nice. Which brings me to number 6. You can really use some imported troops, because your misery doesn't stop here. Don't get me wrong, the Berserker is an excellent tier 3 unit. They got a lot of goodness going on for themselves. The Berserker's Rage makes them really hard to kill for a shock unit, which is a real big set asset. But there are so many much better tier 3 units in game, in my opinion. The Berserker's main takeaway is that they are hard to kill and they can deal a lot of damage before dying. But die they will eventually if you play them properly. They have a very low rate of survival, because the best way to use them is as living hand grenades that just don't die when they should die and open you up some way to cleave down the enemy. But tier 3 units are really not the ones that you want to dispose, which brings me to the final point. Ideally, get yourself some other tier 3 units that you accompany with the Berserkers. There's lots of things that you can pick up out of tomes, but I'm living under the impression that the cultural roster will not be as successful on the higher tiers as others will, because War Shaman, Fury, and Berserker are all good units in their own respect, but they come all with glaring deficiencies on one end or another. Number 7, mobility. this faction is just, I already glanced over it, so powerful when it comes down to mobility. They not only have the fastest units and such things, they also have Ritual of Alacrity, which allows them to get a restoration of movement points when they walk over a outpost over a friendly city. You have so many ways and means to break the entire mobility scheme of the game with the barbarians. I wanted to point that out another time. This is one thing that just is, I think, the reason why some people just don't want to play against these guys, because Ritual of Alacrity is actually, how to put it, the icing on the cake here, which just, yeah, it gives you, again, another speed and mobility advantage. So, in a nutshell, all form racial traits and tome traits that increase your speed or your mobility even further are massively synergistic on the barbarians and put them to the point where they can basically dictate what happens, when it happens, where it happens. And this is basically, if you prepare it right, already a recipe for victory. Number 8, economy issues. So here at least we have a couple of things that we can now point down to are not as good for these guys. Let's see if I can find them here. Yeah, battle ritual side. So here you see it, that the libraries of the barbarians get replaced by variants that all produce draft on the side. The deduction of knowledge is really only low, but it is present, and that is really, really annoying for them. They also have no innate access to the affinities that bring you advantages in terms of research, astral and shadow. So you are really kind of crippled on that end. And the other problem is all your expansionistic madness that you want to dive into, it costs gold, and you have therefore a humongous hunger for gold on this faction, which is hard to satisfy. So I find the economy to be the most downsetting aspect of the barbarians, but luckily we got our foot in the door already on Materium, which helps you a lot on that. And then there's the fact that you also have a build that you tinker around these guys. They're not standing in a vacuum without your help. But at the end of the day, you want to expand stupidly fast, you want to have a big army, you want to have lots of outposts, and you don't want to fall back in the research game. And that is altogether already a pretty challenging package. My personal recommendation here is try to get your foot in the door with Shadow Affinity. There's so many good things that you can do here, which give you bonuses on that end. And the other hand is, oh, I was wrong about that. Sorry, when I said the other point that you have Materium, you have Chaos of Nature, my bad. But Materium is easy to get because it's a good fit. I'm very sorry about that. Anyways, Chaos. Just notice that barbarians have a natural affinity to nature and chaos. Good. So, Call of Chaos and all these down here give you rewards for killing stuff. That is very, very good. And that allows you to just get more and more things that iron out your economy problems. But here again, it is the thing, you have to work on these things actively. You have to kill things. It doesn't fall into your pocket as with other factions. So you need to stay active with these guys. So number 9, swarm compatibility. So this is something that I really noticed due to the fact that we have such a stupidly strong tier 1 roster. This faction is compatible to tier 1 builds like no other. Tome of the Horde, Tome of the Beacon, and other things that increase the power of tier 1 units and make them harder to kill are such a good fit on this faction that I needed to point it out specifically. This is so much fun. Try it out. Not much more to say. At number 10, the last thing on this list, you need some build that focuses on the late game problems of this faction. Because at the end of the day, like I already said, you're not getting that late game bam by default as other cultures have, or your traits don't synergize and evolve that well into the later stages of the game. Therefore, when you're planning your build, always take into account that you want some tier 4 or tier 5 units to bolster up your ranks, that you want some mechanics that make you either more resolute or make you hit even harder so you can decide fights before they even get dangerous for you. Stuff like Pyre Templars come to mind and such. You have many options, but whatever is the case, you need to prepare yourself more for the later stages of the game than others, especially since your research game and your development is not as fast as with other cultures. Therefore, you have sort of this as a compensation for your insane kickstart abilities. But as this game allows you to scale as fast as the amount of assets that you have, which means if you conquer a lot and you get to keep it, you also have a lot of income. And this is the defining factor of these guys. You get to dominate the early game, therefore it is in almost all cases not too hard to win what comes after, at least against the AI. So, I hope this video was helpful for you. Again, sorry for that Materium Chaos slip-up. The affinity system is just frying my head, trying to get my best into it. I'm sure you understand. Leave your comments down below, leave your own thoughts and everything down there. I am not the most versed Barbarian player, I gotta admit. I love them, but I don't play them that much, so I'm all ears about what you have to say. And of course, likes, subscribes, donations, subscriptions, whatever comes to your mind, check out the description box. I can use all the help that I can get. Lots of thanks go out to all you wonderful people supporting the channel. And of course, a big thanks for you watching this video up until the very end. It really means a lot to me, you taking your time through all the ad breaks, my rambling and whatnot. Thanks for that. Hope this video was helpful. Have a great day. Bye-bye.